You have to make sure the machine is at its lowest point, otherwise block it in place so it can't fall when you release the brake. The first step is removing the encoder coupler and the encoder itself off of the motor housing. Once the encoder's off, then you're going to remove the housing itself by taking the 4 Phillips screws out that hold it in place. You might need to use a short screwdriver to reach these. Next step is to open up the motor junction box and unwire the brake wire. Once the motor is exposed, you're going to first take the outer snap ring off so that you can remove the fan. When you go to start removing the fan can be very tight. We suggest wiggling back and forth to try and remove. If you need to use a rubber hammer or prying, you need to be very careful because they can be fragile. They'll crack easily. Once the fan's off, you can remove the keyway by grabbing hold of the edge of it with a set of cutters and twisting to pry it out. Finally, remove the inside snap ring. This will give you clearance to remove the brake and the brake pad. You'll then remove the 3 Allen screws that hold the brake in place. Once those screws are out, you can remove the entire brake. With the screws out, you can then remove the brake straight off the motor shaft, followed by sliding the brake pad off of the spline, and the rear wear plate can come off as well. The replacement brake will come assembled together with nuts holding it in place. The nuts are only used for shipping purposes to keep everything tensioned correctly. So you can remove the nuts and bolts and you can discard the nuts. Those won't be needed during the installation. You'll next want to remove the rubber dust boot to be able to slide the pieces in place onto the motor shaft. Now in reverse order of disassembly, you'll want to slide the rear wear plate on and leave it hanging there. You'll next want to slide on the brake pad and get it aligned onto the splines, so it should slide all the way back. And then finally you'll slide the brake itself onto the shaft. Once you have all 3 pieces, then you'll need to carefully align, get one bolt started. The bolt needs to go through one of the holes in the brake housing and also line up with one of the holes on the rear wear pad, and then it should thread into a hole on the motor face. Make sure you have the brake positioned angled correctly so that the brake cable's coming out the correct side so that it can feed back into the motor box when you're done. Once you get one screw started, then you can more easily align the other 2 screws to make sure everything is aligned together and assembled properly. Snug everything down lightly before final tightening each screw. Next, put the dust boot back in place. Make sure it completely covers the assembly and is not going to get pinched in the brake mechanism. Next is to reinstall the inside snap ring. Make sure that it seats properly in the groove. Next, you'll place the key back in the keyway on the motor shaft. You may need to use your rubber hammer again to fully seat that key in place. Before putting the motor fan back on, apply some anti-seize compound to the brake shaft. Some's been provided with the shipment. Reinstall the fan, aligning it with the keyway. The anti-seize compound should help the fan slide back on easier than it came off. In case the original fan was damaged, we've provided a spare for you. Fully seat the fan so that you have clearance to install the front snap ring. Next, install the front snap ring, and again make sure that it's seated all the way in the groove. And next you can now reinstall the motor housing cover, followed by the encoder and encoder coupler, and finally you can wire the brake back into the motor junction box where it was originally wired. Ensure everything is assembled back how it was originally, and all electrical boxes are covered and all cables are properly managed so nothing snags on anything. Remove any blocks that you may have used to hold the motor in place before testing the machine. Finally, you are ready to test your repair.